depending on where or when you're joining us. This is actually a really interesting webinar, very, very topical. And I think, the whole breach of the SolarWinds breach was so far reaching and so surprising and so sophisticated that it seems like everyone's talking about it. And what we wanted to do is provide you a little bit of insight on what ServiceNow and BitSight can do to help you protect your supply chain against hacks, vulnerabilities, such as the SolarWinds breach. With me today is Leslie Sloan. She's the Senior Consulting Engineer for BitSight. And we're not going to take the whole hour, but we are going to take you through, what BitSight is, what they do, and then how ServiceNow, Vendorous Management, and BitSight can work together to help you protect yourself better. So Leslie, without any further ado, let me turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Teresa.
I'm going to the next slide. There we go.
So for those that are unfamiliar with BitSight, what we do is we collect data from publicly addressable IP space that is observable, and then we evaluate it for conformance to security best practices, and then we align those observations to organizations, producing a 3-digit security rating. So that gives you a proxy for the security performance of organizations, whether they be your that's yourself, but most likely, and especially in this case, your third parties or your vendors that you're working with. And SolarWinds has been in the news for several weeks now. And although the security incident has first hit the news back in December, all the details are not yet known or understood. What we do know is that a variety of different groups, both public and private organizations, were attacked based on the software provided by SolarWinds.
And I think one thing I heard recently was that this is something that we're not going to know how widespread or how pervasive it is for quite some time. So even if we think we have our arms around it, 18,000 customers every day, another customer is realizing that they have been a victim of this. So this is something that is going to be with us for a while, I think.
I agree. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg in what our understanding is.
Yeah. And the sophistication of it was just amazing.
So SolarWinds themselves have said that roughly 18,000 customers have installed this software, and that there was a backdoor that the Trojans signed the software through their normal update process. What this graph represents is the daily scans that BitSight's doing for web services. The top blue line represents organizations with SolarWinds Orion installed, and we see the software being uninstalled and that that overall footprint is being decreased. The red line represents the Trojanized version of the Sunburst backdoor that was installed and is running. And while there's a sharp decline in the number, and that's a good thing, what's concerning though is that it hasn't hit 0, and that there's lots of organizations that still have the Trojanized version that's running in their environment. And the question is this your organization or is this a key third party? And what we've learned in a larger context is just how easily SolarWinds Orion was downloaded and installed in environments, that through the conversations that the BitSight leadership is having with many CISOs from around the world, we're learning that oftentimes they didn't necessarily have to go through a formal procurement process to install this. Many times it was in some test and dev environments, but it was introduced into large environments throughout a formal procurement or a formalized process. So that's one way that it had such a large install base.
So the red line is actually showing me the Trojanized version, and we see that it's going down. This is based upon scans that you're pulling in from BitSight, right?
Correct.
So you're really providing people an objective view of what they've got and being able to pinpoint this software that has been Trojanized.
Well, not only the Trojanized, but then also just the normal footprint of the regular view of the web services that we can see of SolarWinds Orion and its ancillary web services. On our next slide, we can go into a little bit about the BitSight detection capabilities. And what's unique about BitSight is, as part of our normal data collection methodologies, we have these different approaches and many others. But what we're doing on a regular daily basis is scanning the internet, decoding DNS names, looking at net flow information, and also doing things like firmographic data farming, as well as other data collection methodologies. And these were already in place prior to the SolarWinds incident, which is what enabled us to react so quickly when this hit the news. And what we're able to see is that we utilize this information specifically to understand what is the exposure of customers, and then of course their extended ecosystem of who's using this particular suite of software. So it's important to note that this is part of our normal data collection process. That's how we pivoted very, very, very quickly. And that's why we're able to have that data for our customers to react and understand what their overall exposure footprint was like.
Yeah, and this is why you want to be able to do this on an ongoing basis, not
Absolutely.
not a point in time.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we did do in reaction to the SolarWinds incident was to create an attack resource center for our customers. This is accessible through our platform. And what's awesome is through the integration that any of the ServiceNow customers are using into BitSight is that it's quickly accessible through a couple of clicks, and they can then very quickly see what is their extended ecosystem from a compromised company perspective. So what is their overall exposure? And they can then utilize our resources that link out to other sources to know what are the current patches, what can they do with this information, and they can easily understand how to identify the impacted organizations and then start to take some actions from that.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what those actions could be. So looking at vendor risk management, as I said earlier, BitSight, we're able to help you protect yourself against some of these supply chain attacks. And the reason we can do this is because we provide a formalized program. If you have not got a formalized continuous monitoring program in place, you are clearly going to be surprised by things as they occur. So first thing we do is we recommend a formalized program. The reason that vendor risk management is unique is because we're able to embed these business workflows into everyday tasks. So we make it easy for your vendors to be able to respond to questionnaires, to document requests, to be able to communicate with you, to be able to work through issues. We consolidate all that information into a single platform. We've got third-party users, we've got our internal stakeholders, all using the same platform, storing data in the same place. So we're able to pull that information out and display it so you can visualize it in the way that you need to be able to do that. So contracts, be able to provide tiering, the assessments, content, all of it's in one place. Being able to consolidate that communication and collaboration in the vendor portal makes it easy to be able to track events over time, over years, get that audit trail. The other thing that we can do is work with our other applications to be able to connect to the enterprise risk side of the house. So regulatory context, operational risk, business continuity, having everything on one platform with that one common data model makes all the difference in the world. And then providing that vendor portfolio, that vendor portal, provides the connectivity between your business and your vendors and makes it easy. There are a lot of benefits to this. The most obvious is controlling your risk exposure, not in a point in time basis, but continuously. And as we just talked about now with Leslie, if you were doing something once a month or once every 2 months, you would very likely miss those attacks, those vulnerabilities, those issues that pop up in between. Being able to automate workflows, ServiceNow is the workflow company that not only speeds response, but it also allows you to be more productive and to use people in the best ways possible. And then increasing performance and productivity, doing more with less. And then that independent data validation that we get through BitSight combined with the vendor assessments and questionnaire responses that we get from the vendors, putting that all together to giving you a 360-degree view of your vendors. So the vendor portal is really the key to the whole solution. Taking the tiering assessments, taking the BitSight ratings, taking the document requests, being able to track your contacts and have a portfolio of contacts that are continuously updated by the vendor, so they're always up to date. Being able to have that issue management, to be able to remediate issues quickly is critical. And then being able to have notifications and being able to track deadlines is so vital. So through the vendor portal, we're able to do all of that. And then the last thing is being able to integrate with GRC. So for example, through our alerts and through our rules, we're able to identify if there is an issue that has popped up, or for example, if you've sent out an ad hoc request, knowing that there is this attack that is ongoing, to all of your vendors, to ask them if they have installed the Orion software. If that comes back with a yes, you can also ask if they've been vulnerable. If that comes back with a yes, then you're able to automatically generate a compliance violation, automatically generate a risk, automatically send out another assessment or potentially alert internal people to review the vendor status more carefully, maybe switch to an alternate vendor for a little while. And also correlate that with what BitSight is saying. So you want to look at this from both directions, from the ServiceNow Vendorous Management perspective, being able to do the ad hoc assessments, and also from the BitSight perspective, being able to look at those alerts and those scores. So Leslie, can you tell us a little bit more about the BitSight perspective?
Absolutely. So for the extraordinary situations, like I said, within BitSight, we have a resource center. We've got some tiles, a dashboard set up so that you can understand what your exposure is for your vendors. And because we have that bidirectional integration set up and we can see what that tiering is between ServiceNow and BitSight, because you've set your tiers and you understand your business criticality of your vendor, you can then see what your exposure is in BitSight, go back into ServiceNow, execute on the actions that you want to take with that vendor, get a sense for what are the actions that that vendor is taking, what are the remediation steps that they are taking, really get a sense for what is your risk in terms of that extraordinary event like SolarWinds. For the more, I don't want to say routine, but the more frequently occurring type of risk that we see with vendors, that's going to be more specific to that one vendor's performance over time. And that's where many of the alerts that BitSight customers would be setting based on their risk tolerance in the BitSight platform can then flow through into the ServiceNow platform. And the best way to see that in an aggregate is going to be in this dashboard, which is part of the BitSight for Vendor Risk Management integration application. So here you can see what are the critical alerts that I have set up based on my risk tolerance for each of my vendors. I can then click into any one of them, which would then start a workflow process of engaging with them. So again, if we go on to the next screen, we'll see that what that pop out looks like. And here, if I have named who my vendor contact is, this is the action that comes that I can utilize from that alert. And it comes in the form of sending an invitation to your vendor to engage them with the BitSight platform. You're able to send the invitation right from the ServiceNow interface. Again, it's using the BitSight for Vendor Risk Management integration app, which is available on the ServiceNow store. The BitSight team will then engage with your vendor contact directly so that we can teach them about BitSight. And we're doing the heavy lifting about what is BitSight, what's the platform, how does your vendor contact use BitSight in order to remediate the issues that you've identified as being below your risk tolerance. You then continue using ServiceNow as part of managing your relationship with the vendor. The benefit from that is the difference that we have seen is that we see vendors that are accessing and taking advantage of this are twice as likely to improve their rating. And over 6 months, we've seen that rating increase by over 50 points. So that's the action that you are taking and the results that you're gaining from working with your vendor and having them engage with the BitSight platform is the overall reduction of risk in working with that vendor and an increase of their BitSight rating.
So Leslie, I think we have a question. Can you see that in the Q&A panel?
Sure. So the question for the rest of the audience here is, does BitSight offer risk quantification in addition to risk rating? So let me go back and again, so what BitSight's doing is we are looking at cybersecurity performance based on observations we can see from data that is traversing the publicly routable IP space. We have 23 risk vectors that we are applying a grade to, or 18 of which that have a grade. The other 5 are informational. So I say that since we're applying a grade to those 18, that is a risk quantification. This is all in terms of cybersecurity performance. And I appreciate that there are other elements to vendor risk management. So our focus is only on cybersecurity performance of a vendor over time. So you get that as well as the risk rating. So I'm hoping that we got their question fully answered.
Yeah, and I think you can see on the dashboard that you are quantifying this. For example, the alerts you're showing that people are changing from a 530 to a 500. So they're going low. Their score is decreasing. Their rating is from a C to a D. If you think about it from a A to F scale, is decreasing. So I think you can see on the dashboard that these various scores that you're quantifying are changing based upon what you're seeing.
Right. So every vendor has both a 3-digit rating along with 18 risk vectors that have an A to F grade associated to them. So that would be the risk quantification elements to both of them. And thanks for the question.
Yeah, and ServiceNow has, we use the ServiceNow platform, so it's very easy if you're using another system to help augment the information that BitSight is providing, that we're able to take that in also. Anything else for this particular slide?
So no, this is the benefit of working with your vendor is really that ideally they're going to take our guidance to heart and improve their security posture and performance over time. So going forward, what can you do? So these are the 4 steps that we are advocating that what you can do, what are the actions you can take. So first and foremost, understand your organization's exposure to SolarWinds within your organization, and then more broadly, expand to your extended ecosystem and your broader supply chain. Report those findings to your senior executives and board. More than likely, they're already asking you or have already asked you. They're very interested in this information. And then three, Teresa, I think this one hits the nail on the head of what we've been talking about all along. Just continually reevaluating your TPRM program, understanding the components of your tiering, your contracts, your risk assessment, your continuous monitoring of third parties. That seems to feed right into the wheelhouse of ServiceNow. Any deeper thoughts there you wanted to add before I go on to the fourth one?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really the key is you and you know, you and I were talking before. I think the so much like the pandemic really exposed a lot of gaps in people's risks programs, not just internally, but also their supply chain. I think the SolarWinds hack, I think that just there's another nail in the coffin. You know, people realize now the supply chain is vulnerable. They realize the damage that having an attack against the supply chain can have. And I think that organizations that have not put the focus on creating a formal third-party risk management program and and assessing their vendors, tiering their vendors, and then continuously monitoring their vendors, I think are now their eyes have been opened to the fact that this really is very much can affect the bottom line of their business and the success of their business. So, you know, I guess the basic message here is if you take nothing else away, take away the fact that you need to put some kind of formal program that continuously monitors your vendors in place.
Yeah, that continuous monitoring is such a huge impact. I've seen so many organizations that you feel like we're performing very, very well, and then something changes in their environment. And if you are only doing a review on a periodic basis, even if that's once a quarter, once a year, so much can change in a security performance perspective in a short window of time that can have a dramatic impact on your organization in relationship to your your performance, that you really do want to get a notification as early as you can. And that's where the fourth point of leveraging the BitSight vendor access capability to proactively share that data with your vendors. And that's part of our subscription. That's not an extra cost. So this is all part of it. And I see we just got in another question for the rest of the audience. The question was, BitSight can monitor only a vendor's internet-facing security environment. They cannot monitor the vendor's internal environment. That is correct. BitSight is an external monitoring perspective. There are no sensors, scanners, or monitors within an organization's private network space. So external only, correct.
I'm wondering though, I have heard though, don't you have some customers that are actually using BitSight to monitor their own external facing sites?
You're correct. So organizations use the BitSight data for their own security performance management or to monitor their third parties. The data itself is what we are observing from outside the organization, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't gain insight about what's happening on inside the organization. So, for example, we do get a lot of insights about what's happening inside an organization. One great example is that we have our own single infrastructure where we will pick up on malware that is making outbound calls from inside an organization's perimeter. So if I am picking up on malware calling outbound, I know that a piece of unauthorized software has been installed, and that means it's evaded being detected by an IDS or an IPS. I know that it has had enough privileges on that endpoint to be installed. I know that it has made it through being checked by malware antivirus services. I know that it has not been picked up through change management or change monitoring software. I know that it is now communicating outbound, so it was not picked up on any sort of DLP program. So that tells me that that's 5 or 6 different layers of security that this piece of malware that is now calling outbound that I'm seeing from the outside has missed as part of a security program. That tells me a lot about that security environment. So even though I see it from the outside, I know a lot about the inside.
And not in a good way.
It raises concerns.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I think it's safe to say that, even using, looking at your own self is a great way to use the BitSight software, but absolutely, for your third parties is what it was designed for. But it's been a lot of valuable information that it can actually provide.
Absolutely. So some resources here for organizations to leverage. So if they are interested in a deeper dive on the forensics of what the BitSight team has found with the understanding of SolarWinds, really breaking it down and going back through. We have a couple of Ask Me Anything webcasts. They are available. They were recorded on bitsight.com. Stephen Boyer, who is our CTO and co-founder, walks through those and does a really great deep dive on the forensics of what has been available with the SolarWinds incident. The second piece is the BitSight for ServiceNow integrations. I'm thrilled to announce we have 3. Not only do we have BitSight for vendor risk management, we have one for security incident response, and now our latest just was published last week for IT service management. And then finally, of course, your BitSight and ServiceNow sales teams. We are resources here ready to work towards your success, meeting you where you're at on your journey.
And then for the ServiceNow side, we have the VRM, Vendor Risk Management website that you can go to find information specifically about vendor risk management, or if you'd like information more about the overall risk portfolio that we have. When we have the product page, you can go hit for there. Leslie mentioned the ServiceNow store. We, very active community. Please join the community. We'd love to hear from you there. And there are a lot of other Ask the Experts out there on the YouTube channel. Any more questions in the question pop up there, Leslie?
Not as of right now.
All right. Well, then, I think, the bottom line here was formalize a program, put something in place, and then it's a journey. You're not going to overnight develop a very robust program, but it's a journey. Start somewhere, begin, add to it, mature your implementation, pull in data like BitSight data to give you that subjective feedback on your vendors, get that 360-degree view, and then continuously monitor it with ServiceNow and with BitSight. Thank you so much for joining us, Leslie. I think this was a great conversation. I learned a lot about what BitSight can do for the SolarWinds breach, and hopefully you all on the phone also learned something. Thank you. Oh, I think we have another question.
Looks like we do.
Oh. So what is the use? So for the audience, what is the use case in VRM after integrating with BitSight? So the use case, and it is well defined on the store. So it's bringing the BitSight data into the ServiceNow interface. So making use of the BitSight rating data, the data with the risk vector information, the alerts, the awesome feature of how we can take different assessments and map the BitSight risk vectors to those assessments, such that when your vendor answers your assessment and you view those responses in ServiceNow, you can see in context of that assessment what are the BitSight risk vectors and the grades associated to them. So it really makes the job of the vendor risk analyst much easier, much more efficient. You're seeing all of this data at the time that you are onboarding or assessing your vendor, as well as looking at changes over time. So not only at the time of onboarding, but continuously monitoring that vendor, and you're getting the best of the workflow processes available within ServiceNow, but utilizing the data that you get from BitSight all in the same interface. So 1 + 1 = what, 5?
Yes, exactly. And I really see using the BitSight data in a couple of different ways. I'm a big proponent of, when you're at that evaluation phase of a vendor, you should be doing a risk assessment on them to determine whether or not you want to onboard them at all as a vendor. As part of that risk assessment, you should be looking at the BitSight ratings, because the vendor is going to give you some information, but it's always nice to have that objective view from a cybersecurity standpoint. The next point is at the tiering. So again, you're going to tier your vendors. Best practice, determine if this is a tier 1 vendor or a critical vendor, or if this is someone who mows your lawn and you really don't need to assess them on a yearly basis. At that point, the vendor again is going to give you information. Having that BitSight rating to give you that 360-degree view of that vendor and maybe adjust the tier appropriately is another great use of BitSight. And then on a continuous monitoring basis, and this is where we try to make it easy. So when you as a customer get that vendor assessment back and you look in that questionnaire and you see the answers the vendor has provided, right next to the answer is that snapshot of that BitSight rating. So you can see the vendor said, yes, I patch within 48 hours all of my critical vulnerabilities. And then you see that BitSight rating that says that their hygiene has a score of C, perhaps. And you know somewhere there's a disconnect. So now you can go back to that vendor, you can have a conversation and find out where that disconnect is. You can also look at the vendors that are having consistent problems. Maybe you've had a few conversations, they're not improving, you're continuously tracking them. It's time to look for an alternate vendor. You don't want to be caught unawares if, for example, you're in a pandemic and a vendor is risky because they're in an area that might get quarantined, or they're risky because they may not be able to deliver the goods and services to you that you need to do to be successful in your business. So the BitSight ratings can give you visibility into that also. So I really see using it in 3 different ways to be able to provide value. I'm not sure. Any more questions? I don't see anything else in the pop-up here for the questions. So any last parting words, Leslie?
Just that if anyone would like to see this, live in action, again, the ServiceNow sales teams, the BitSight sales teams, we're both enabled to show you this in action. Would love to work on your challenges directly with you and meet you where you are on your journey.
And we have